Hi, folks. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got David Anderson joining us. My name's Daniel Plug. I'm the organiser from the Melbourne Kanban meetup, as well as the Sydney Limited Whip Society. And we've also got people joining us, I think, from all over Australia. I know that there's people from Adelaide, Perth and Brisbane, I think, that are also joining us. But I've got Silke here as well from the Wellington meetup. So, Silke.
Yes, kia ora everybody from Aotearoa, from New Zealand, which is where this meetup idea basically started, and it quickly swapped over to our big brother Australia, because back in February I met Daniel when I was lucky enough to get over there just before the borders closed. So we decided to work a little bit more together to bring some of the Kanban goodness over here to our side of the planet. And when we invited David, because I know quite a lot of people because of my German origin over there in Europe, it quickly spread over the world. And I actually think we have quite a few people here today. We will wait a little bit longer, some minutes, and welcome everybody once everybody's here, and maybe have a little look around where people are joining us from. That'll be quite interesting.
Yeah, just to clarify, everyone will be on mute. We've got everyone on mute for the moment. So if you do have questions, just pop them in the chat channel. We will get them answered as we go through.
Cool. 7 past. Numbers are still growing, but we're kicking off now. So welcome everybody again who hasn't heard what we just talked about before. Kia ora from Aotearoa, from New Zealand. I've got the meetup here in Wellington, and which is where this meetup idea started, and then quickly spread over to Australia, to our big brother, because I met Daniel back in February and we decided to do a little bit more together. He's got 2 Kanban meetings over there in Sydney and Melbourne. And maybe Daniel, do you want to say something about your meetups?
Yeah, so thank you. The Melbourne Kanban meetup's been going pretty strong for several years, and we've had a resurgence, I guess, in the last 3 or 4. But the Sydney meetup's been a little bit quiet in recent years, so this year I'm trying to get it up and going again, because there's so many wonderful things in the Kanban world that'll help people in their businesses and organisations. And I think really today's going to be no exception there. I first met David in person, I think it was about 2015, when he actually came down to Melbourne and ran a course down there. And I think, you know, for me, that going to that course really changed my life, and understanding more about Kanban. You know, it's not just cards on a wall. There's so much depth and wealth of knowledge, and a wonderful group of people around the world that practice Kanban that you can call upon. And that's why I just love running the meetup groups, because you meet so many fantastic people and have a great exchange of information. And it's really fantastic to have David here today talking a little bit about, you know, the topic about Kanban is refreshing. And I hope you'll get a bit of a taste for what I did a number of years ago, and really start to let Kanban help you change your organisation and your life. So, David.
Yeah, I can only agree with that. The Wellington meetup only just started towards the end of last year, when I came back from Europe as an accredited Kanban trainer, but got infected by the Kanban virus much earlier and discovered the magic of Kanban. I'm a big Kanban fan as well, and I just really want to spread the word in Wellington and New Zealand, and do exactly what Daniel has done in Australia, and have a nice little Kanban community where we share the Kanban magic. Yeah. So the meetup quickly spread over the world, and then we decided to open it also completely up to everybody, wherever people would like to join from, because some of the positive sides of this is that David can actually virtually meet us here on this side of the world, something we wouldn't have thought of 2 months ago. So I'm quite interested to see actually where people are dialing in from today. And I would like to know this by continent. So maybe if you could just quickly pop in the chat where you guys are. Is there anybody who's dialing in from the Americas? Doesn't look like it. And
it's the wrong time of day for them.
Yeah, it's the wrong time zone, isn't it? And what about Europe? There must be some, I think. It's early morning over there.
We're seeing Germany, India, Turkey, Melbourne, Munich, Sweden, Germany, Adelaide, South Australia, Berlin, Poland, Singapore. Yeah, so we've got people from a lot of places.
Awesome. And what about Africa? Okay. Feel free to read it out, Daniel, because for some reason I can't see it at the moment.
Yeah, so we're seeing Perth, Australia, Houston, Texas. It's 1 a.m. That's commitment.
Wow.
Yeah, fantastic. India.
Wow. Cool. So that's already. So we're already in Asia. Who else is from Asia?
We got Sandra from Singapore.
Yeah, that's it. And from Oceania, Australia, New Zealand, or maybe who knows, from the Pacific Islands.
Getting Melbourne, Wellington, Sydney.
Awesome. Cool. That is really cool that we have so many people over here. So then it's time to welcome David, and thank you so much that you're doing this for us today with your much appreciated time. And Kanban is going to talk about how David is going to talk about how Kanban refreshes all parts of the system. And David is can you say the inventor of Kanban, David, of the Kanban method? Or the founder?
Yeah, okay, that's technically correct.
Yeah, he has written a lot of Kanban books. He has established the Kanban University, which is where we are accredited by Daniel and I, and able to give accredited Kanban trainings. And he's just working on the new version of the Kanban maturity model book, I think. And yeah, what else?
I think that's keeping me busy enough at the moment, Silky. we're progressing towards launching not just the book, but the 1.2 release and all the assets that go with that, the posters, the other guidance. And hopefully by the end of this month, the book probably the second week of June. But we'll talk about that as we get into the presentation.
Yeah, I think you've got some slides about the Kanban maturity model in there as well. Cool. So I'd say, should we kick off with the presentation, David?
All right. Well, thank you, Silky and Daniel. Welcome to everyone in Australia and New Zealand. It's been a while since I've been down there, as Daniel said, 2015 in Melbourne. And I think just 2 or 3 months earlier, at the end of 2014, I was in Auckland. Very briefly, I flew the whole way from Europe to Auckland and back just for 4 days. One of the more tiring business trips that I've taken. So I'm coming to you today from my home outside of Bilbao in northern Spain. Diana's actually sitting in our office in downtown Bilbao. And today's actually the first day that there's even just a little bit of reopening here in the Basque Country in the province of Vizcaya here in Spain. Officially, we entered what's called phase 1 today, but not the whole of Spain, just certain provinces. So it's actually legal again for Diana to be at our office, but she's the only one there for the time being. So the time zone made it possible to do this. The other part of the year, I'm in Seattle, our office there, and it's the middle of the night in Seattle right now, so I don't think we have anyone from the Americas online. All right, well let's get started with this. Kanban's refreshing, and we have one of the characters from the cartoon on the cover of the Kanban book, 10 years. This right now, just about this week, in fact, is the 10th anniversary of the Kanban book, and the characters from the cartoon on the cover are about to get a whole new life. And this is the first of what will probably be a series of cartoons that we're going to use in various campaigns. Right, so Kanban provides a refreshing approach to managing your business, and that's a really key point. It's what we're doing here is managing businesses. We're not trying to make software development a little bit faster or a little bit more fun. We're actually trying to change the performance, the resilience, the robustness, the survivability of businesses. And I've been doing that for about 15 years already. So Kanban refreshes the parts other methods cannot reach, and the rest of this presentation I'm going to explain what's behind that. It refreshes your employee engagement. We're going to talk about that, and your product and service delivery. I think that's what most people are familiar with Kanban. Your customer satisfaction, your economic performance, your organizational culture, and your business resilience. So each of these 6 things, this is our agenda for this session. We'll start with employee engagement. So this is the original cartoon from the cover of the Kanban book, 10 years old this week. And we see here a fairly typical scene in front of a Kanban board, the daily meeting, and how is Kanban helping improve our employee engagement? Well, we have visualization of otherwise invisible work. We have relief from overburdening, although maybe not in this particular cartoon. There's no WIP limits yet. They have some hope that things are going to improve, and hopefully they have a sense of purpose. There's a shared purpose that they can see the work, they can see the workflow. Hopefully they have visualized who is the customer, the type of work, what has the customer asked for. Perhaps we know the customer's expectations, and if we're very advanced, we even know why the customer is asking. There's a lot more cooperation across this workflow, and there's collaboration and trust. And if we get good at this and we deliver predictably for the customers start trusting us too. The customers have a lot more transparency, and they become a lot more collaborative in the relationship in terms of how we work with them. And there should be alignment and unity. We should be able to see what we're doing, know why we're doing it, and we can align and unify multiple organizational units behind a shared purpose and a shared goal. And all of that improves our employee engagement. So it summarizes this, right? We visualize the work, the workflow, the risks, the purpose, the customers, work in progress limits, Kanban limits, relieve workers, and the workflow from overburdening. That improves the predictability, it improves the quality, and it improves the pride of workmanship. Because nobody gets out of bed in the morning, comes to work and thinks, yeah, gee, I really don't want to do a good job today. Nobody wants to go home at the end of the day feeling they've done a bad job. And if they've been relieved of overburdening, if they're able to do things with proper time and attention, high quality, they're able to meet the promises they've made people, then they go home feeling a lot better. What we see in the cartoon, of course, is change. We have an understanding of the system. We have empowerment to act. And the change is incremental and evolutionary. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. So the changes are less risky. There's a lot less inertia. It's easier to keep making small improvements. Customer service, customer awareness, expectations. And why? We should be able to see those. We should know who the customer is for a ticket. We should be the work item type, what the ticket represents should be some customer-facing item. The customer should be able to recognize their ticket if they were present, if they were able to see the board. And ideally, we should know why the customer is asking, but we recognize that's a more advanced behavior and doesn't happen at the beginning with most groups, most organizations. Trusted and respected, collaborative, empowered, predictable, and transparent. And we have unity through the purpose of cooperation across organizational boundaries. In a Kanban world, you reorganize as a last resort, not a first resort. You don't walk into an organization and say, hey, let's reorganize everyone into cross-functional teams or pods, squads, tribes, and so on. Right? We encourage people to cooperate together, and regardless of where they sit in the organization. Right, moving on to number 2, Kanban refreshes your product and service delivery. So another chance to see the cartoon, Kanban refreshes the parts other methods cannot reach. There's a Kanban pattern to suit every situation in your organization. And I don't have time to show you all of these. There are many of them described in the Kanban maturity model book, at least 15 or 16 different Kanban patterns. But regardless, the key is always to be capable of identifying services in your organization. And what's a service? There needs to be a customer. Customer asks you for something. You do something to fulfill their service request. And if you do it properly, their needs are fulfilled and they're happy. So customer walks into a Starbucks and asks for a cup of coffee. Starbucks make them that cup of coffee. Customer receives it, walks out happy. They're in the cup of coffee service. And that's pretty obvious to anyone who works in a Starbucks, a shift supervisor, a store manager, and so on. But it turns out that in knowledge work and professional services, intangible goods, and I've been doing this a long time now as a business for more than 12 years. When I encounter managers in most high-tech companies or professional services companies, and I ask them a basic question like, so what does your department do? What service are you in? They really struggle with that. They struggle to see services. So it's a core thing we have to teach people. Now, the Kanban method's really built on this concept that if you can see a service, then you Kanban that service. And that your organization is built of an entire network of interdependent services. And the diagram here is actually a real example from a German bank. And you see that every one of the nodes here is potentially a service other than the customer, they're the requester. And there's the potential to Kanban each one of these nodes. And within each node, there might be a cascading set of internal services. So you identify the services and you implement Kanban from first principles for each service. For every service, there's a Kanban system. Now, we have here the cartoon again. We use this to demonstrate evolutionary change in action. I wish I'd changed that title. Right, so it's a Kanban board. Now this is a workflow Kanban board. And there are several functions involved here, and they might all sit in the one organizational unit, and they might call themselves a team, or they might not. But the Kanban board models the service. And this would be one board for one node in the network. So our scaling principles, you scale Kanban in a service-oriented fashion. You identify services, you implement a Kanban system for each one, and we have a means for doing that. It's called the static method, the system thinking approach to implementing Kanban. And Daniel, Silky, and 300 other Kanban trainers around the world teach this in our fairly basic Kanban system design class, the KMP1 class. So the skill you learn in the KMP1 class is actually sufficient to scale Kanban in an organization at a very large scale. And we use what are known as the Kanban cadences, the different feedback mechanisms in Kanban, 7 of them altogether. And as you build those out, you create a feedback loop across the network so that the impact of dependencies across the network gradually resolves. This photograph's from a project actually in 2007, so it's a long time ago now. And this project was more than 50 people and budget of somewhere in the region of 11, 12 million US dollars. This board, therefore, is a board being used to coordinate an entire project of more than 50 people. And actually, the work in progress shown in this board, the tickets on this board, are worth more than $2 million in just cost expenditure. The green tickets are customer-facing tickets. They're features the customer has asked for. And we have 5 development teams on this project, and each one of them has a lane on the board. So the development teams represent a feature development service. They pull one feature into their section of the board, and they design, build, test that feature, and then it moves to the far right of the board for integration testing. They break the feature up into smaller items, user stories, and they flow those across their lane on the board. So we have a parent-child dependency relationship, and we have five teams that are offering a feature development service to the project. The same board, the column that's shown here is actually the testing column. It's the user story level testing. And the testing team were an outsourced facility in Chennai in India. The project was in Seattle at a company called Corbis, which Bill Gates owns, where I worked as the director for software engineering. And the team in Chennai is a shared service, and we know this because there's a width limit at the top of the column, and the column spans all 5 of the dev team services. So while this is the Seattle board, the team in India might have their own team level board for doing testing, and they might treat each one of the 5 dev teams as separate customers. Now, this testing group in Chennai provided testing for all of Corbis IT, not just this project. Now, whether they'd have a separate board for the project or one big board for everything they did for us, that would be very much their choice. But we would expect them to be able to separate out each of their customers, and different teams in the Seattle office would represent different customers. The orange tickets on the board, they're actually avatars for people. They have people's names on them. And each of those individuals is some form of shared service. The enterprise architect, a guy who's become quite famous called Troy McGinnis, the database architects, the user experience designers, and so on. They're services, and some of them are enterprise level shared services. Some of them are simply project level shared services. And what creates the need for shared services is that you have fewer people than you have teams. If you have 2 user experience designers, you can't embed them into 5 software teams and call them all cross-functional teams. The user experience designers offer a shared service to the 5 dev teams. So each of these people could have a team level or a personal level Kanban board. In fact, you might have an executive who provides an approval service. So why not put a personal Kanban board on that executive's door? And if you need something approved, you walk up to the door, you stick a ticket on their board, and they become aware that they have to provide an approval. That anecdote's a real anecdote. So you take a look at your organization, and that organization could be thousands of people, tens of thousands of people. We've seen examples, particularly with big Chinese companies, where they've done 3,500, 5,000. One company that had the ambition to scale to 98,000. And I haven't been back to find out how well they were doing, but they were at 5,514 product units the last time I met them. So you take a service-oriented view of your organization, you see the services, you Kanban each service, and a service could be a single individual, or it could be a project with 55 people on it. So third on our list was customer satisfaction. How does Kanban refresh your customer satisfaction? First of all, we want you to understand your customer's purpose. Why have they asked for something? And understand their expectations, understand that those expectations have a design element, an implementation element, and a service delivery or customer experience element. In other words, what are the features and functions? How well have you implemented it? Does it work properly? Is it buggy or not? And how long did I have to wait? Did you deliver within my expectations? Were you predictable? Are you trustworthy? Was it a pleasant experience doing business with you? And define meaningful KPIs, meaningful metrics that are oriented around your customers' expectations, because it's these that are going to drive the right improvements. That you make lots of small improvements, you will evolve towards customer satisfaction. And you earn customers' trust through customer intimacy. What do we mean by that? In the Kanban maturity model, we have 3 levels. There's customer awareness, you know who the customer is, you know what they've asked for. There's customer service and satisfaction, that you understand the customer's expectations and you're capable of meeting them. And then there's customer intimacy, you know why. You know why the customer came to you. You understand their circumstances, the risks they're managing, and knowing that enables you to make much better trade-offs, much better internal decisions. Now, Alexei Zegloff and I developed an entire framework for solving this problem of improving customer service. And it all came about from a very basic and simple sounding question, but it's very profound. When do you know whether a change will be an improvement? A change to the design of your product, a change to the way that you do things? When do you know that's going to be an improvement or not? And thinking about that from 2014 onwards, what evolved out of it is something called the Fit for Purpose framework. And Alexei and I wrote a book on it. So as we explored that, we realized that there are commonly recurring customer expectations. There are things that most customers care about most of the time. There's delivery time, whether you're predictable, how long did it take, whether you delivered against a deadline that I had. The quality, whether you delivered the features I expected, whether they worked properly, the non-functional quality, whether you meet safety and conformance requirements or not, whether what you're doing is affordable and represents good value for money or not. And optionality, if I'm buying particularly a product, some durable good, and I want to keep it for a while, it's likely that I want it to be useful for more than one purpose. So I need to be able to reconfigure it. It needs to be soft in some way, changeable, extendable. So we like optionality. And then last of all, we like convenience. We like geographic convenience, things to be nearby. We like temporal convenience. We like open all hours. And nowadays, we like virtual convenience. In the late 20th century, it was things like telephone banking, then it was web banking, now it's mobile banking. The more convenient you make something, the more people like it, generally speaking. Right. Now, Kanban helps directly with the first four, and the Fit for Purpose framework covers all 6 of these. So if you want to know more about Fit for Purpose, more about how we really improve customer service through customer intimacy, get the book. It's available from good online booksellers. Currently, it's the 2nd edition. All right. Next, number 4 on our list, Kanban refreshes your economic performance. Economics can always be improved in several ways. You can produce more of whatever it is you do. So for the same amount of effort, more stuff arrives. And while it's not always the case, we would expect that more is generally valuable. And producing something faster, if I can make something for you in 3 months and it used to take 6 months, that has an advantage. It has an advantage that you can wait 3 months later before you ask me to do it, and that allows you to buy a lot of additional information, a lot more certainty about your situation. Or you can have delivery 3 months earlier, and that may have some business benefit for you. And we refer to that as avoiding cost of delay. Selecting items with greater payoff, more value for the same effort. So if we have capacity to do 100 things per month, which are the 100 most valuable things we could be doing? And we have some quite sophisticated means for analyzing that and filtering it using risk assessment frameworks and triage mechanisms, figuring out when to how to select the right items, when to schedule them, what order to sequence them in. And then reducing costs, spending less money on the same activities, or reducing, eliminating wasteful activities such as rework and unnecessary planning or analysis. In other words, if you perform work for which the customer really doesn't care and they don't see your input in the product, then doing less of that is a good thing. Less planning is a good thing. Less analysis is a good thing. In general, reducing transaction and coordination costs for doing work, for accepting a customer's order, cooperating and coordinating the work effort, coordinating the cooperation, and then the transaction cost of delivery, and for that matter, for the customer taking delivery. You reduce all of those, you save everyone money, right? All of these things improve the economic costs. And it turns out Kanban helps directly with all 4, but some of our advanced material that we refer to as enterprise services planning particularly helps with number 3. Now we have lots of case studies from 12 plus years of doing this. And for those of you familiar with the Kanban maturity model, on this diagram, easy, intermediate, and hard refers to maturity levels 2, 3, and 4. And case studies, examples, conference presentations we've seen that mapped to those different levels. Now at the easy end of the scale, maturity level 2, we see between 10 and 50% productivity improvements. That's more. Instead of 100 widgets, you're getting 150. And the delivery time shrinking by about 70%. Instead of 100 days, it's only 30 days. At maturity level 3, so it's pretty typical of early Kanban implementations, early case studies from more than a decade ago. 100 to 300% productivity improvement. The very first one we ever did in Microsoft's IT department, we produced 230% productivity improvement and reduced the delivery times by 91%. So typical lead time reduction in the 70 to 90% range, and typically double to quadruple the productivity levels. Now, the harder here is maturity level 4, and there is maturity level 5 and 6, but not many case studies there, certainly not ones that have captured economics. But at level 4, we already see examples of 8-fold productivity improvements at non-trivial businesses like Hewlett-Packard's printer, laser printer division, and the BBC Worldwide's website development. And that was something like 22 departments. And that data is actually the result of an academic study, and some of you will know David Joyce, who now lives in the Sydney area, and he was the manager in charge of that group. So 8-fold productivity improvement and greater than 90% reduction in lead time with HP's laser printers to reduce the time to produce a new one from 21 months to 3.5 months. But at the time when they made the intervention, the 21 months for the previous laser printer was forecast to rise to 52 months. So actually they turned around what would have been a 4.5-year development cycle for a new generation of laser printers. They initially turned that around to just 5 months. That's a greater than 90% lead time improvement. And with the following generation, they cut it to 3.5 months. We also help the economics by using classes of service in the Kanban system and giving some priority to which ticket is pulled based on the ticket's cost of delay. And we teach how to understand this stuff in a very simple and qualitative manner. And we're actually moving to an even simpler system towards the end of this month, very early next month. You'll see us release some assets that there'll be a poster for what are called triage tables, and you'll be able to follow this essentially infographic, and it will tell you, it will give you advice on which class of service you need to choose, and some advice on the starting time for an item in comparison to when you need it, when you would like to take delivery. We've also encoded this into a mobile application, and Deanna, who's been facilitating the session for us, she's actually the product manager for that mobile application. We'll be launching that at the beginning of June. So you'll be able to take the mobile app into meetings, and when someone says, well, which ticket should we pull next, and which class of service does it need, and what if we delay it for a few weeks? You'll be able to do all of that using this essentially pocket calculator application for cost of delay on your mobile phone. Very easy to use. Or alternatively, you can print out the poster, put the poster on the wall. So cost reductions, the whole idea of eliminating unnecessary work, reduced planning. We think a good Kanban implementation takes about 85% out of your planning. In fact, we have a very solid mathematical proof that shows that unless you have a particular type of cost of delay, you don't need to waste energy on dependency management. And we know from empirical evidence that that type of cost of delay typically applies to between 10 and 20% of demand in organizations. So as an average, probably 85% of the effort you're making on dependency management is total and utter waste. And you can eliminate that. We can teach you how to do that. We have classes in it. There's standard stuff from the School of Management. Reduced rework. A typical Kanban implementation shows about 90% less defects in rework reported, rework tickets that go backwards on the board. Simply because you improve the quality coming forward, you use pull criteria, you set certain standards, expectations, you've relieved people of overburdening, you have time to do things properly. And then eliminating unnecessary work, reduction in the abandoned and aborted tickets. So if we look at the original example implementation at Microsoft's IT department, they had 52% abandoned tickets being submitted. So they were only doing 48% of what they were asked for. The rest were forgotten about. Aborted here means that we actively started working on it and then changed our mind about it. It's not unusual to discover that organizations have at least 50% abandoned and aborted work. And that's stuff that they put effort into up front. Kanban eliminates all of that. So all the things I've talked about in this section, over the last 5 years, we bundled that into a concept we call enterprise services planning. The ability to select, schedule, sequence, prioritize work, the ability to understand the economics of what you're doing and improve it. But it's a very big body of knowledge, enterprise services planning, and we've been packaging up parts of it and making it more accessible. And the Fit for Purpose framework is one example of that. Kanban refreshes your organizational culture. So organizational culture is really at the heart of the Kanban maturity model. This is a new logo for the KMM with the 1.2 release and the second edition of the book. And this roundel captures the pillars of the Kanban maturity model architecture, that its culture, practices, and outcomes improved through managed evolution. Culture, how we live, what we value, the principles and norms that we live by. Practices, how we do our work, and for us specifically, the Kanban practices that we're using to get that done. And outcomes, how well we're doing all that work. What's the customer experience? What's the regulatory authorities' experience? What about other stakeholders? How do they view us? It's demonstrated results. And the maturity model, the organizational maturity levels, are defined by outcomes. When we talk about an organization that's maturity level 3, it's because they meet customer expectations and the customers are satisfied. It's really nothing to do with Kanban practice adoption. The observable maturity levels based on the ability to achieve an outcome. Kanban also changes the organization's approach to change. It's an evolutionary approach to change. And evolutionary change involves 3 basic elements which are all present in the cartoon on the cover of the Kanban book. First of all, there has to be some stress in the environment. And this is a pretty typical sports coaching model. The sports coach's job is to push the person they're coaching out of their comfort zone, make them a little bit uncomfortable with their current situation. Then there needs to be a reflection mechanism. There needs to be a feedback loop in order to reflect on that stress. And then there has to be some act of leadership to do something about it. So the cartoon captured all three elements. We see the Kanban board in the background. We read the conversation. There's clearly stress in their environment. They have this Kanban meeting in front of the board. They have the visualization of the board. They have a reflection mechanism. And then the character on the right-hand side shows the act of leadership. So what happens next, the doing something about it, is where we hope for some improvement, some evolutionary change, that there's a mutation happens next, and then we continue and we repeat. So the Kanban maturity model, right, it's based on the idea that culture follows values, practices follow culture, and outcomes follow practice adoption. And this is an overview. This is from the 1.1 release. The poster for 1.2 isn't completed yet. We're working on it this month. And this defines the 7 levels. And notice the levels are organizational maturity levels. It's not Kanban maturity. What we do is we map appropriate Kanban practices to different levels of organizational maturity. And organizational maturity is based on outcome. You'll see there's a significant section of this poster focused on culture, culture and leadership. And we recognize that the impediments to practice adoption are usually cultural. And if you're going to change the culture, you need leaders to behave differently, and we need to provide them with a means of doing that. We need, so the idea is that you lead with values, and the values are column here, different values that are necessary for achieving different levels of organizational maturity. You lead with those values, you change your behavior, your decision making, the actions that you take, the culture changes, that enables practice adoption, and practice adoption enables the outcomes that you seek in order to improve to the next level. So, understanding culture, culture is the sum of the values we hold and our behavior. Behavior is decisions and actions of anyone showing leadership. Now, here's an example of how you coach a leader to lead with values, to adopt a value and change the culture of the organization. And this is actually one that I first published in 2009. It was based on content of an academic paper that I co-authored in 2007. That particular paper has become the most heavily cited paper in lean software development globally. And in a much bigger scale, it's published on a Wiley website, and the year it was published, it was the #1 cited and downloaded paper on that website in all sciences. It was remarkable. They gave me an award for it. So value trumps flow, and what that means is we would expedite at the expense of flow to maximize value. And flow trumps waste elimination, increase width if we're required to maintain the flow. Normally, we would think of increasing the work in progress as adding waste. We might add staff to have instant availability of a shared service, and create redundancy in a system in order to improve flow. That would add cost, but there might be times when that's appropriate. And waste elimination trumps economy of scale. So traditional 20th century business school teaching, industrial teaching, that economy of scale drives down unit cost. In professional services, that just doesn't apply. So we drive efficiency by reducing the transaction and coordination costs of selecting, scheduling, sequencing, and delivering work. The upfront cost of choosing what you're going to do and when you're going to do it, the cost of coordinating it as it flows through your system, and the costs of transaction cost on the back end of delivering it. So a decision filter for every cultural value deepens the organizational maturity. We're going to publish those decision filters for every level. So as an organization can identify what level are we at, what does the next level look like, which of the values at the next level do we already hold, which ones perhaps are missing, and how do we introduce those? How do we get our leaders to change their behavior? There will be a decision filter to help them with that. So here's an example of decision filter for leadership at all levels. If you can do something about it, just do it. Act rather than ask permission, and it's better to try even if you fail than not to have made an attempt. So periodically, we need some feedback loop on this. We need some way of reflecting, are our decisions and actions congruent with the values that we claim to hold? Are they congruent with these decision filters? Have we made decisions that align with these statements or not? And if not, why not? And what are we going to do about it? We develop leaders by teaching them the decision filters and holding them accountable. There has to be a feedback mechanism. And this is the first images of the second edition of the Kanban Maturity Model book. Some of you saw Daniel hold up the first edition at the beginning of the session. This will be available in early June from your usual online booksellers. All right, lastly on our list of how Kanban helps with refreshing your business resilience. So what is resilience? Well, this list of 12 points here is actually from clinical psychology, but I borrowed it from a recent book by Jared Diamond, where he was applying this to nation states and looking at the resilience of different cultures and different nation states historically. And if we look at number 6 here, the technical term ego strength, when a psychologist talks with you or me, they don't use the term ego strength, they use the term resilience. And they talk about whether an individual is resilient or not, and the level of resilience determines how well they cope with crisis, how much stress they can take, how much anxiety they can take before it breaks them. But actually, there's all 12 points here that affect how well an individual is capable of managing a stressful event in their life. So acknowledging that there is a crisis, that's key. Accepting and taking responsibility, don't play the victim. Building a fence, ring fencing what's already good and just focus on the problems. Right. Get emotional and material help, both normative and structural. Normative is changes to the way that you do things. Structural are changes in your social relationships, your status, your recognition. Use models or archetypes. So case studies, experience reports, honest self-appraisal, previous experience of a crisis, having some form of institutional memory, patience, flexibility on how you do things, what it is you do, why you're even here, and who you are, your identity, who you are as an individual. And then having explicit values, and finally freedom from constraints. So sometimes constraints can be sort of man-made, they're in your head, and a therapist will help you explore those and get over them. Sometimes they're real environmental constraints, like if you're bankrupt, you've got no money, that's a constraint. So the good news is here that the Kanban community and a good Kanban coaching professional can help you with at least 10 of this list of 12. You need to acknowledge there's a crisis and there's some challenges around constraints which are external. But all the other things here, numbers 2 through 11, Kanban can help you with those. Kanban can help you cope with crisis. It can improve your business resilience. And we've come to realize that organizational maturity is analogous to resilience. For several years already, we knew from case study literature and empirical observation that low maturity organizations panic under stress and regress. They lose their cool and they take a lot of damage when they're stressed. Where high maturity organizations, they behave in a much more anti-fragile way, where you stress them and they follow procedure and improve. They maintain their discipline under stress. So by improving organizational maturity, and we have an entire codification for that, we now have a 300-page book on it. We can move you down these levels, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, in a systemic manner. And consequently, we can improve your business resilience. This slide shows how social psychologists divide up the world. And social psychology is the study of how individuals experience social change psychologically. And it's 4 categories. Stability, where we have happy people, there's no pressure for change and no change happens. Inertia, where people are unhappy, they're frustrated, but they're, for whatever reason, incapable or unwilling to make change, and therefore no change happens. And then we have the cases where change is actually happening, and that's divided into incremental and dramatic. Incremental, the same word I used when I started doing Kanban 17 years ago or thereabouts. They really mean evolutionary change. And this is a situation where there's little resistance or anxiety, change is happening, but the changes tend to be normative. They're changes to how and what you do rather than structural. They're not changing your relationships or your position in society. And the Kanban method is really in the incremental change column here, where dramatic social change, we've got unhappy people, they're full of anxiety, fear, stress, and crisis. Change happens, but the change is always structural. When you change someone, we make a structural change. When you change someone's job title, or you change their position in an organization, or you reorganize your business, so you change the status, the recognition, potentially the level of respect that someone receives. You may even affect the dignity of them doing their job. That has the psychological effect of throwing the individual into crisis, into the clinical psychological meaning of crisis, which is this anxiety, fear, and stress felt by structural change. And agile methods, all agile methods do this. Everything that preceded agile did it too. Anything that comes along and says you get a new role, new responsibilities, a new job title, that's a structural change. And the reason we need so many agile coaches who think they're dilettante therapists is because agile is designed to throw your workforce into psychological crisis. Kanban doesn't do that. Kanban's much more refreshing. Right, so Kanban delivers on incremental social change, and that's really refreshing. That as a global market of professional services, knowledge workers, that's so badly needed. So last couple of slides here. This is something called the Tribal Assessment Framework by Ray Immelman from his book, Great Boss, Dead Boss. I'm not going to explain all of this diagram, but it's a 2x2 matrix. And what we have in the columns are whether the organization, whether the tribe, the social group feels threatened or it feels secure. And on the rows, we have whether individuals within that social group feel secure or insecure. And psychological crisis happens when people feel insecure. So we're looking at the bottom row, and specifically the bottom right-hand corner, where we have some threat to our business. Perhaps we're a bank and we're afraid of fintech startups disrupting our industry. So we feel threatened as a bank, but if we've just installed some agile method which has thrown our workforce into psychological crisis, then the workforce is in the bottom right-hand corner of this diagram. And this is a pretty disastrous situation. When it's security that's threatened, it's everyone leaves the organization quickly dissolves, individuals lay claim to the tribal valuables and they go look for somewhere else to join. On the second slide, what Immelman's looking at here is what he calls value, and what he means by that dignity, recognition, respect, and status. These are also key elements in psychological crisis. So if our organization is feeling ignored and disrespected, we're in the right-hand column. And if individually we're feeling that our role lacks dignity or we're not getting recognition, respect, and status that we deserve, then we're in the lower row. That's the zone of psychological crisis. And if we look at the bottom right-hand corner on this diagram, we've got finger pointing and blame involving outsiders. They're called consultants. Loss of focus, promoting own worldview, infighting, and looking for new symbols of value. These are pretty disastrous situations to be in, and Kanban avoids all this. It's key to why Kanban is a refreshing approach to improving your organization, and particularly to improving the resilience of your business. I think at a time where everyone recognizes that we all need more resilience. So in order to cope with crisis as an organization, individuals need to feel secure and valued. Kanban helps by reducing the likelihood of individuals suffering psychological crisis during periods of existential threat to the organization. Nobody gets a new role, responsibilities, or job titles, at least not initially. That only happens as an emergent thing later. Right, so in conclusion, just to wrap this up and we can have questions, Kanban refreshes the parts other methods cannot reach. Right. And the resume of what we've discussed, Kanban refreshes your employee engagement, it refreshes your product and service delivery, it refreshes your customer satisfaction, refreshes your economic performance and your organizational culture. And perhaps most importantly, at this point in our history, it refreshes your business resilience. So you folks are the first to see this new diagram, the house, the temple of enterprise resilience. It's a service-oriented organization. You manage the flow of work through that using enterprise services planning. You improve the resilience with the Kanban maturity model. And all three of these pillars of enterprise resilience are founded on the Kanban method. Right, so Kanban refreshes all aspects of your business. Right? Let Kanban be the foundation for the resilience you need now and in the future. And if you thought this was interesting, this diagram illustrates specifically our Kanban training pyramid, and Daniel and Silke would be delighted to help you learn more about Kanban with the Team Kanban Practitioner, Kanban System Design, or Kanban Management Professional classes. And if you're interested in some of the more advanced classes on Kanban maturity model, Kanban coaching practices, or our change leadership masterclass, please contact my own staff. And Virginia Santos would love to hear from you. Virginia@djaa.com. Drop her an email. She's in our Bilbao office. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and attention, and we'll take some questions.
There's a couple here, and these are some of the folks that I know from the Melbourne meetup. So Dan Prager has a question. Does this org maturity model roughly align with psychological maturity models like Keegan's, Torbert's, or spiral dynamics, and so on?
I don't know.
All right. There have been some other questions just before that as well. Is it fair to say that the maturity models are context dependent and that the best level is more about what's appropriate rather than striving for the top level?
To some extent, yes. That I'm trying to figure out how to get this all to work. To some extent, yes. Presumably, I'm not sharing anymore. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Hi, David.
Yeah. We make a strong argument for the idea that pretty much every business needs to be maturity level 4. Levels 5 and 6 are a lot more optional. So level 5 is the concept that you want to be the best, you want to be the market leader. Not everybody does. And I like to use Formula 1 as the example. If you were looking at the Formula 1 market, then Ferrari want to be the best, Mercedes want to be the best, McLaren want to be the best, Red Bull want to be the best. But you know what? The rest of them, they're just happy to show up. They just want to be part of the show. So why level 4? Why does every business need to aspire to be level 4? Well, resilience and robustness. So the cure for inherent fragility in your business comes from having happy customers. And so level 3 is the point where you have happy customers. But imagine you had happy customers, but you lost money on every transaction. Well, eventually, you're going to run out of capital. So level 3 actually isn't a sustainable level. Level 3 is a point where you either regress back to level 2 or you proceed forward and you achieve level 4. So we believe that every business needs to aspire to be level 4. But levels 5 and 6 are optional. Long-term survival is optional. But if you care about having medium-term robustness, you need to be level 4.
Thank you. The next question I've got is the customer focus in Kanban specifically talking about the end paying customer or more about the internal customer a particular individual or team is servicing? If it's the latter, is there any emphasis on teams, individuals getting close to the real customer through evolutionary improvement?
So evolutionary improvement doesn't have an emphasis. It has perhaps a goal or an end state or what you might call a fit state. It's fit for its environment. And if you need to be closer to the customer in order to serve the customer better, then that evolution should happen. The answer to the first part of the question is that the person who requests the service is the customer in the local sense. So imagine that we're running an advertising agency, and this is based on real experience, right? There are advertising agencies using Kanban. So the external customer, they walk in the door of the agency, what they're asking for is an ad campaign. But inside the agency, the request for an ad campaign from the external customer cascades down into all sorts of different departments: copywriting, copy editing, graphic design, photography, picture editing, and so on. And those internal services, they will experience the concept of an internal customer, because the copywriter doesn't get asked for a campaign, they get asked for copy. And a photographer doesn't get asked for a campaign, they get asked for particular images, the output from a photo shoot, perhaps with particular goals which are meaningful in the context of the campaign. And would it make sense for the photographer to have more direct access to the end customer? Perhaps not. A lot depends on how good you are at communicating the context information. And in Kanban, we much prefer that you create transparency, that you get good at communicating context information. So a Kanban ticket should tell you who the customer is, why they're asking for something, what they care about. And that information should flow through the organization in a meaningful way. And the need for the photographer to have a direct conversation with the customer for the ad campaign wouldn't be necessary.
Cool. Neil is asking, are there any particular fit-for-purpose digital Kanban systems you would recommend?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? It dropped out in my ear.
Yeah. Are there any particular fit-for-purpose digital Kanban systems you would recommend? I'm not sure if I understood.
Oh, okay. So,
right.
Yeah,
cool.
so there are three providers of Kanban software that we have partnerships with. They are Swift Kanban, also known as Digity. There's Kanbanize, and there's Kaiten. Now, the fact that we have a relationship with them is an indication that we recommend them in some shape or form. But do these tools do everything that we teach in the training? No, they don't. And is there significant room for improvement still? Yes, there is. On the other hand, the vendors would claim that the gaps that remain are mostly maturity level 3, 4, and 5 gaps, when most of the market is at maturity level 0, 1, and 2. And therefore, their product is perfectly good for where the market is at. And I think there's truth to that argument. We also have a partnership with Nave, which is a software plugin for traditional tracking systems like Jira. So Nave provides metrics that you need for the right feedback loops. And of those 4 vendors, the one that I think pays most attention to what we're doing and tries the hardest to provide features that, you took the training class, which product actually has the features that you learned in training. Nave is the one that's doing that the best at the moment.
There's actually Sonia Sidorova, who is the founder of Nave. She will probably be in one of our meetups beginning of June as well.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. So the next question, do you have any tips for helping clients understand the importance of shifting from deterministic future modeling to probabilistic?
Tips in helping them shift. I think that there has to be a stressor, there has to be a reflection mechanism. So what were you trying to achieve? And you made some deterministic plan, And there has to be a reflection mechanism on, well, how good was that plan? How well did it help us? And if it's not helping us, what do we do about it? Now, the issue there is that what we see a lot of is people double down on the same behavior. The conclusion is, oh, our plan was bad because we didn't do enough analysis, we didn't do good enough estimation, we need a better method. And they end up spending more time and money, becomes this vicious cycle, longer and longer time doing planning and estimation, much more energy and money sunk into it. And to be honest, I've witnessed that over the last 15 years with the Agile movement. We're lousy at making promises we can keep, so let's double down on more estimation, more planning. Agile people aren't allowed to call it analysis, because analysis is something that the enemy used to do in the 20th century. So really the question you're asking is, how do you kick people out of this, this vicious cycle? And I think the reality is that it fits into that category, the social psychological category of inertia, that you've got a global warming problem. And the global warming problem is that you're spending more and more time and money and energy on more and more deterministic planning at a finer grain, looking for something smaller than the atom so that you can weigh it. And eventually that frustration is going to pop, right? And you need to be ready with the answer. You need to be ready with the alternative. And people need to be open to, let's give something else a try and see if it works better for us. Because the existing situation, at some point, it's self-evident that it's not fit for purpose, that it's not delivering on what they need, and that it's, in risk management terms, it's a very concave sort of law of diminishing returns activity. But I'm sympathetic. It's not easy to get people to kick these habits. The deeper the pocket, the more comfortable the organization, the more money they have to waste, then the harder it is to kick them out of their bad habits.
Next question is, how does Agile cause the panic? Can't remember the term David used in the change slides.
Yeah, so anything that involves structural social change. So an example of a structural social change, you get married and you have a baby. And the day before the baby arrived, you were not a parent. And the day the baby arrives, you're a parent. That is a structural change in your life. Right? If you get fired from your job, that's a structural change in your life. If you've been a very successful programmer and you get called into the corner office one day and they say, Daniel, we think you're a fantastic leader in the programmers, so we're going to promote you to department manager. And when I worked at IBM, that process involved sending the person away for a 5-week residential training course. And when they came back, they were changed. They were different people altogether. So any form of structural change in your life will have an impact, neuropsychological impact that manifests as crisis. Right? If a family member dies, a pet dies, you know, if you move in with your girlfriend, if you get married, if you have a baby, and so on and so on, all of these things have an effect, and some of them will affect you more than others, and some of them are more dramatic than others. So when someone comes along and says, you're not a project manager anymore, you're being sent on a 2-day training class and you're going to be a scrum master, what that says to you is we no longer respect you as a project manager. We no longer give project managers any status. We don't respect what you do. We don't recognize the value of your Gantt charts and your planning mechanisms and so on and so on. And everything that really makes up that person's identity has been disrespected. And in a neuropsychological sense, that part of the brain is sometimes referred to as the reptile brain. It's a very old part of the brain. Plato referred to it as the thymos. So the thymos controls your identity, your feeling of status and respect and recognition. And the neurotransmitter for it is serotonin. So when someone comes along and says, you're not going to be a project manager anymore, we're sending you on a training course and you're coming back as a scrum master, what that does is it sends the serotonin level in the person's brain into deficit. They feel attacked, and it invokes a fight or flight response. Now, for some people, it's not going to be very bad. And for other people, it's going to be huge. And it will affect individuals differently. But the reality is that any restructuring in your company causes psychological crisis in the workforce.
Thank you. It is good to hear what Kanban does, but it would be useful to understand how it does that.
I think you need to take the training class with Daniel or Silke to understand how.
Thank you. Love that. Can you talk a bit more?
You can, of course, buy my book.
Yeah. I mean, all sources you can access about Kanban. I think you can read a lot of things in books. That's the blue book that Daniel's just showing. We just call it the blue book, or I personally also call it the Kanban Bible. And that's the condensed Kanban. That's actually a free download from Kanban University. Everybody can access. And there is that's the essential, and there is also an upstream.
Yeah, you can download the PDFs from our website, or you can buy those smaller books online also.
And cool. So, but I would also recommend, I mean, I'm learning about Kanban so much every day. There are videos out there, and it's a never-ending story. And that is just like Kanban is really just the best example of itself. It's evolving. The Kanban maturity model, I think, is only just 2-3 years old. Is it, David?
Yeah. So we launched the 1.0 last year, a year ago now. And it had been 2 years before that from publishing the first community preview. So Theodora Bozeva and I have been working on this for 4 years altogether. And it's based on about 12 years of experience and empirical observation and case studies and conference presentations, other people's conference presentations. But that's right. And the 1.1 release was a relatively minor revision to 1.0 in October, November last year. And now we have 1.2, and it's pretty stable at this point. I'm not expecting a 1.3 anytime soon. And the second edition of the book, which is about twice as thick as the current first edition book, we expect that to be very robust. There's a lot of content in there from the KMM and the KCP training classes. So you can take the training class, or you can buy the book and read it very thoroughly. That's always been the case. We want to know how to do this.
Or both.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, both indeed.
Yeah, I agree with both. Can you talk a bit more about the triage tables you mentioned to help prioritize work?
Yeah, it's it's a little bit of a rabbit hole in that it could take 20 minutes to explain it properly, but and we have a whole presentation on this. And at one point, I actually had that section in this presentation, and I realized it's going to be too long. So the idea is to get to a point where you can ask people very simple questions, and we always prefer fact-based questions. The person who was asking about deterministic planning and estimation, they tend to be speculative questions, you know. How long do you think this will take? How big is it? And those aren't facts. But if I say to you that we need this product released for Easter, and we have to release it in the middle of January so that we can sell a whole bunch of stuff between mid-January and Easter, that's a fact. We're making a product specifically for Easter. So we're interested in facts, and it turns out there are only five basic facts we need to know in order to determine when you should start something, what class of service it should be given, and then we can start using those comparatively. Now, the first version of the little software app doesn't do the comparisons, and the triage table will, again, the poster, it only works for a single item. So question number one, how do you expect the payoff from the item over time? So traditional product management literature will tell you that new products, and they were talking about physical products, things like televisions, they follow sort of a bell curve adoption. And it starts slow in the market, gradually builds up, and eventually tails off. Bell curve over some period. So we have a set of patterns, and we say, right, which pattern applies to your situation? Second question, how long is the life cycle? How long is the thing you're releasing going to live? If you're releasing something for Easter, then it's got about 90 days of life cycle. I used to work making BIOS code for IBM PCs, and it used to take us a whole year to generate a new PC, to design it, make the circuit board, integrate all the chipsets and the new processors. And they would release a PC, a server or a ThinkPad, and it only had 3 months in the market, and then they replaced it with a new model. So again, a 90-day product life cycle. But there are other things that you release might be for a whole year. One of the case studies we had, Blizzard Sport, and they make skis, and they release new versions of the skis every year. So they get 1 year life cycle. But back to question one, you release new skis in November. When do you sell them? Between November and the next November, where do you sell all the skis? Right, and the reality is that you sell most of them right at the beginning. It's a very front-loaded function. You sell them in December and January and maybe February, and then a bit of a tail off into the spring in the Northern Hemisphere, and then through to the next November and another spike. So most product people can answer these two simple questions, and then we need the lead time, or we need some understanding of at least the shape and the length, the range of the lead time for the Kanban system. And we use those to look up a set of tables. It's like scuba diving tables. And it took some number of years to figure this stuff out. Not like we were working on it every day. It was long periods of nothing and then small epiphanies. But it was Dragos Dimitriou who was the original project manager on the original Microsoft IT implementation of Kanban. He was the guy who suggested the concept of the way you need to solve cost of delay in class of service and scheduling is to have the equivalent of dive tables for scuba diving. And we have that now. The triage tables, they will be, we're teaching it already in class, and it's just a case of getting the bandwidth from my graphic design people so that we can get the assets out to you. We also have a mobile phone app, which is functional, but it's a bit ugly looking just at the moment. and we'll be launching the mobile phone app at the beginning of June. So that it works like a calculator. You know, you select the shape of the value payoff, you tell the life cycle, you input a little bit of detail about the lead time, and then you express, you know, when would you like to take delivery and what are the customer expectations. And you press the calculate button and it tells you the class of service, and you can play around with different start dates and it will show you how class of service changes as the start date is earlier or later. We'll add more functionality to that later in the year. Eventually we'll include dependency management in there, and we'll be including like comparative assessment of at the moment, to do comparisons, you have to do it manually, a bit like using a pocket calculator. Calculate the first one, write down the answer, calculate the second one, write it down, make a comparison. Eventually, we'll get more sophisticated with the app, but our plan with the app is that basic functionality will be completely free, but really powerful features, you're going to have to pay for those.
Thank you. Just a little bit watching the time. We've got 21 minutes left, and I've got about like 7.5 questions to go through. I hope we get through them.
All right, let's bang through them quickly then.
Yeah. Can you show the house diagram again? Well, network dropped out for him, but I think we are actually, I think we're providing the slides, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. So if that questioner isn't on,
yeah.
If they're not on anymore, but I'm sharing again. Can you see the share?
Yes, and it is the right one. It's not the presenter mode. It's the presentation mode. Cool.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So you can see me sharing, yeah. So the house, yeah. So was there a question, or were they just wanting to see the picture?
It was just wanted to see it again, yeah.
Right.
How would you describe leaders' understanding of Kanban in 2020 compared to 10 years ago?
I think that's a very difficult thing, because the size of the market is dramatically bigger. But I think from our perspective, what we see in the early days of any new market, there's a lot of people in there who find it, you know, intellectually stimulating, and they want to debate fine points like exactly how do you draw the Kanban board, and where should the width limits span, and how do you calculate the width limit, and what exactly is a Kanban, and you know, the whole nomenclature is under debate, and it's all very uncertain and confusing. And compared with 10 years ago, those people are largely gone, or they're drowned out by better quality information. At the same time, some things haven't changed, right? It's very clear that there are leaders in the Agile community who continue to deliberately generate disinformation about Kanban in order to slow down market adoption, and that hasn't changed in 10 years. And it's the same people, by and large, who are still doing it. So in some ways, the market has got cleaner, and people come to Kanban University as the trusted source for high quality Kanban information, while there are without doubt others in the Agile community that continue to try to retard the adoption. Meanwhile, if we look back at 10 years ago, Kanban was kind of a new thing, and now any Agile survey that you look at, even though I personally don't consider Kanban to be an agile method. I consider it created the Kanban method because people were struggling with agile adoption, so it was the alternative path to agility. But in any agile survey, you see Kanban is always listed as the #2 method, and I think that after Scrum is #1, and therefore I think that's a huge achievement. And it's also recognized as something that scales from the personal level to the portfolio level and entire business units. And that wasn't true 10 years ago either. It was a nascent concept back then. There was certainly a few examples of personal Kanban and portfolio Kanban. And again, 10 years ago, we didn't have the confidence to say Kanban works for all knowledge worker, professional services, intangible goods industries, and now we do. About half of all the training certificates we sell globally go to non-IT related people. So geologists or oil companies doing oil exploration, and people in ad agencies and market research companies and HR departments, sales and marketing departments, finance departments. We've seen entire medium-sized companies where they've implemented Kanban in every function. That's all different than compared with 10 years ago.
Right. The next question is from Pip, who unfortunately already left. She had to drop out. She's one of my Wellington peeps, and she already booked the KMP1. When starting with Kanban, what do you see as the most important thing to begin with? There are so many concepts to get across to an organization, and they are all important. Where is a good place to begin?
So I think you always start with, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Where's the source of dissatisfaction? And what's the outcome that you're looking for? Right. So if someone says we've got unhappy customers, right? So rewind back to October 2004, and I get a phone call at my desk in Microsoft from some heavy accented Romanian guy from the other side of the freeway on the IT part of the campus, and he wants to talk to me about the fact that he's just volunteered to manage the IT department with the worst customer service record in all of Microsoft, and he wants to fix that. So fundamentally, you start with what's the problem you're trying to solve, and then from that, you should be able to take a look at the Kanban body of knowledge and figure out which bits do you pick out of there in order to explain or pitch the Kanban to those folks. So if it's about customer service, then we need to understand what are their expectations. Well, in that example, there was a service level agreement and they weren't able to hit it. So we're trying to, well, first we need a bit of instrumentation, but they had that already. So we've got a long, fat-tailed lead time distribution. We need to trim the tail off that. We've got a whole bunch of techniques for doing that. That's basically just practice lookup. Right, so you look up the practices and say these are the practices we need to adopt in order to trim the tail here and improve the customer service. So you need to start with the problem. What's the outcome you're looking for? What's the problem you're trying to solve? And then pick the bits out of Kanban that make sense for that.
David, could I also add to that this is one of the key things that we teach in our Kanban system design course. And for everyone that's on the moment, of course, we can't do the in-person thing with the coronavirus happening, but there are beta programs getting the online version of that going that are running right now, and we hope to bring that to you in the coming next few months.
Yeah, I was thinking exactly the same when David was answering, and Pip's already booked on my KMP1, which was supposed to run in April, but looks like New Zealand is getting to level 2, and we might actually be able to do the physical version really very soon. And I've got some sign up.
The Get Kanban game using masks. I think that's how it will need to go. But that particular class is a very experiential class, and it's one that wasn't easy for us to adapt to the current situation. And we've been working with Patrick Stair and the Okaloa Flow Lab people to create an online simulation game. And that's in the beta trials at the moment. So the online version of the KMP1 class is coming. It's a bit like a vaccine for the virus, you know. It's like we need to trial it with human beings first and see how well that works. And if it works well, then you get your KMP1 class very soon. And if it doesn't work well, then we'll have to reset a bit and try again. So we don't want to make too many promises, but we're hopeful that before the end of this quarter of the year, there will be online Kanban system design training again. And it's fantastic that New Zealand might actually be able to do it as physical training.
Yeah.
Many other countries are a long way from that.
Yeah. I mean, I will be able to offer both in the end. I think we all do. It's just I really like it because I actually do have the physical version of the Okaloa Flow Lab over here in New Zealand, and I think I'm the only person apart from one other person who have the beta version of the physical version, so really old version. And I'm working with that one, and I've got Arlette and Patrick on Skype on Wednesday, and they are actually thinking, I was wondering if they could do like a meetup as well, and we will talk about that too. They're interested. Yeah, so
you still have a few more questions we have to bang through, right?
Yeah.
Here's one. Did you want me to keep going? I'm keen to understand more about the organizational nodes depicted on one of the slides and how they relate to value streams. Is each considered a value stream or a step in the stream?
Yeah, I understand the root of the question. There's a long, complicated answer to this, which is we don't believe in value stream mapping. And the concept of a service-oriented architecture isn't a value stream map. But you might look at each node there and say, well, it's part of a value stream and it has some sequence of things. But we really want it viewed as a standalone service, because it could be playing a part in many value streams. And therefore, the value stream, in my opinion, would apply to a single ticket. You know, customer came in the door and said, make me an ad campaign. And there'll be a value stream for that customer's ad campaign. But the nodes in the network could be an individual, could be a personal Kanban, it could be a team that just does one activity. So it looks pretty similar to a personal Kanban, but it's a team Kanban board. Or it could be some workflow that involves multiple teams and multiple activities. All of that's true.
Right, sorry, I missed one there. Sorry, Katrina, this is Katrina's one.
Can you still, go ahead. I think that's the one.
Some of the promised benefits of Kanban, even if you aren't implementing it on a systems level.
Sorry, Daniel, repeat the question.
Yeah, and maybe Katrina may be able to qualify or clarify this. Can you still fulfill some of the promised benefits of Kanban, even if you aren't implementing it on a systems level?
Yeah, so like I think she means the team level, which we refer to as maturity level 1. There aren't a lot of tangible economic benefits in any of our observations at maturity level 1. That you'll get intangible benefits, like you might have a happier workforce. Right? You might have one of these little happy face boards, and you get more happy smiley faces on there, and therefore we might want to declare some victory. You might get some secondary effects, that you get localized quality improvement, and that might actually come through. The customer might detect some improvement. You can have really maturity level 0 to 1 so level 1 transition case study from a division of the Mars Corporation called the Banfield Pet Hospital. And the customers perceived dramatic improvement there in quality and predictability. But generally speaking, at that level of maturity, there's no instrumentation to translate into any real economic benefits. We start to see that at level 2.
Right, another question. Tips for adoption at a business unit or enterprise scale, bottom up or top down, taking the execs on the journey?
So from the early days, I used to say this, and Mike Burrows would say it too, that Kanban was designed to be led from the middle. It's designed that you don't need a lot of executive permission or support in order to make it happen. It's also designed such that you're dealing with customers and that there's people who are responsible and accountable for taking a customer's order and fulfilling it. So I think that the answer is typically that you would start in the middle and you scale out in a service-oriented fashion. You pick some node in your network of services and you start there and gradually you let it spread. And a recommended way is that you spread it across nodes that connect. But we have seen other successful approaches done. There's a new case study that will be presented at some conferences this year. It's actually from a travel company in Mexico called Best Day. And they improved all their shared services at the team level, and it had a magic effect at the sort of customer-facing workflow level. So the customers perceived a dramatic improvement, but they didn't actually tackle that part of it directly. So they scaled across similar sort of shared services rather than nodes that were connected to each other. That was also very effective.
Right. There's a question here from Andrew. So Andrew's asking, Kanban seems to focus more on supply delivery, but how is it suited or can it be used to address supply and the investment pipeline and evolving work into the delivery pipeline?
Yeah, so that generally referred to as upstream Kanban. And we haven't emphasized it a lot in the materials. There is the essential upstream Kanban book that Patrick Stewart wrote, and we're preparing to introduce an equivalent of our KMP2 or Kanban Management Professional class. The new version of that class is called Kanban System Improvement, KSI, and we're doing an upstream equivalent of it called KDI, Kanban for Discovery and Innovation, and I'm hoping to start piloting that as early as July. But the likelihood that, say, Daniel or Silky could offer you that class, probably not until the beginning of next year. But it's well understood material, and there is already some upstream Kanban content in the existing KMP2 class, in our enterprise services planning materials and classes. If you look for it, you'll find plenty of examples of using Kanban in upstream. Things like new drug discovery, for example, has been case studies. Oil exploration, these are all upstream activities. You talk to an oil industry guy, the geologists are in the upstream.
Next one was from Katrina, but it's not a question, it's just an observation. She says, your ideas, David, align so much with the strengths-based approach to coaching and transformation.
There is
Very good.
a really quick one before we're going on with the real questions. Are you planning the trainer sessions in Australia?
You know, of course I own the company, but I actually don't know the answer to that. The problem with Train the Trainer is it's very much has to be an in-person thing, because we can't we can't form the trust in the trainer using online train the trainer. So the strategy that they're adopting at Kanban University is to do more smaller train the trainer classes and a lot more regional, but it requires us to have a train the trainer trainer in a particular region. Right, so you're going to see, for example, train the trainer in the Netherlands and in Germany with two different train the trainer trainers. And the same thing in Latin America, in the Spanish-speaking world, and the Portuguese-speaking world, and probably South and Central America differently, or Mexico, or probably North America. Australia and New Zealand, I just don't know that we have someone in the region who can train the trainers. And then the question would be, is there someone in the region that we could bring up to that standard, and how would we achieve that if everybody's locked down? And alternatively, could we bring one of our train the trainer trainers to Australia? I think we would love to be doing it, but at the moment it's difficult.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, I know. I went to India for my the trainer class, so there's a bit of trouble.
Yeah, it's a good observation. Every year, usually in August or September, we do train the trainer in Bangalore. But you know, this year, who knows? There's never been a year like this in our history.
Mm. Yeah, I've done it in Europe as well, but yeah. Well, maybe we've got 1 minute to go, but Roy has been asking this question for a while. In this COVID-19 era, do you have suggestions how to visualize, since we don't share a physical board now?
Well, obviously there are online Kanban tools. However, you don't necessarily need visualization, or if you're working from home, and I did some recent blog posts on this, we need to start viewing the whole organization as a service-oriented organization. And if you're working from home, you need to think of yourself as a service of one, in which case, why can't you have a personal Kanban board? The requests maybe arrive by email or Microsoft Teams or some other means, but you can still visualize. The alternative is to realize that visualization is one of the tools we have. We like it. It engages people emotionally. We, as human beings, we experience the visualization in a very similar way. It affects our brains in similar ways, so it encourages consensus thinking. We love visualization. But if you take the visualization away, you don't break the Kanban method. You just handicap it. So removing the visualizations, like doing Kanban with, you know, one arm tied behind your back, it's not impossible, it's just harder. So I'd encourage you to take a look at the blog posts that I did. They're on the djaa.com, very recent ones. It's actually a series that I haven't finished. I got distracted shooting video for online training and trying to finish the KMM book, and I will be getting back to it in the next few weeks and months. There'll be more articles in that series, but we're really trying to encourage in a work from home coronavirus world, there needs to be a lot more service oriented thinking and a lot less team thinking, right? The articles I'm talking about are the ones that use the imagery from the Matrix series of movies. You'll know that you've found the right one when you see the picture of Neo and the message says, "There is no team." We need to really start thinking like that. If this coronavirus world we're in now is going to be around for 3, 4, 5 years perhaps, then there is no team. If you're working from home and your employer just told you you're working from home until the end of this year, that's already happening, then you're a team of one for the rest of the year. And organizationally, we all need to learn to adapt to that. And if you can think that way, you can have your personal Kanban board on the wall in your home office or somewhere else in your house.
Last question, and I think we'll go through this. Feel free to stay on board, people, even if we're after 8 now. As a Kanban organization, any insights from how you have adapted during COVID, and how would you rate the speed quality of your response?
Okay, so I've blogged about some of this stuff already, and so the articles are also on my LinkedIn from a few weeks ago, and that explains that. Now, in general, we recognized pretty early what was happening and the sort of impact it was going to have. And the challenge we had was that other people didn't recognize it. So when we were trying to renegotiate contracts for things, or change the way we were working, we're getting a lot of resistance, and it took some time to get over that. But essentially, we're reacting by reinventing the business. That we're primarily becoming an online training company. We're becoming a software company. And you will see more of those changes rolling out. The stuff I blogged about, we divided at the time when I wrote it, and the management meetings we were holding, we divided the time frame into 5 different phases. And phase 1 was just the very beginning, was just recognize there's a crisis and figure out how much money do we have in the bank, and how much more can we acquire, and grab any liquidity we can, lines of credit, and so on. And then right through to like phase 5, which would be extending out, the time frame was 18 months to 3 years, and recognize that our business is going to be changed forever. And the obvious group of companies is going to be changed, right? And there's a certain amount of that I'm not comfortable sharing publicly in terms of the speculation we have about how our bigger business will change. But our business is quite robust in the sense that we have a lot of different products and services we offer. We're very global. So for a small company, we have a lot of diversity in there, and some things have suffered very badly, like our conference business, and other things not so badly. We had some flexibility, but we've also had to go through a grieving period. We have 2 very beautiful training facilities, one that's brand new in Bilbao and the other one in Seattle. And the reality is we're not going to be using them for physical trainings anytime soon. Half of the Bilbao training facilities being turned into office space. The other half's being turned into basically a TV studio. And we have another facility in Bilbao that we're in the process of building out, a second office. We're changing the plans there and adapting in different ways. And some stuff I will blog about soon. The idea that, if you're self-isolating at home, or you're just following government orders and staying home, you're in a nice, safe, trusted environment. And if you drive to work, like I do, get in my car, and that's still a trusted environment. And when I get to the parking lot in central Bilbao, I very carefully, with a bandana, press the button to get my ticket for the parking. And then I leave the parking lot and I walk about 2 blocks to my office. And at least so far, the streets haven't been terribly busy when I've been doing that. And everyone's now wearing a face mask, right? So it's a pretty trusted environment. We go into the building owners have been keeping it spotlessly clean. Something they didn't used to do. So it's more trusted, but I don't want to trust the elevator. So I walk up 6 flights of stairs to my office, and I go in there, and I want that to be as trusted an environment as possible. So we're investing in more kitchen equipment. We want people to be able to bring their lunch, to cook their lunch. We are ordering in food for the staff. We're making other changes to make the office space as safe as possible. And with the new office that's unfinished, we're changing the design so it will have a full kitchen. We'd already planned to have showers, and we're now extending that into a full laundry so that people can, we can launder our own stuff in the office, and that it has to feel like a home away from home. It has to be as trusted an environment. And I think a lot of employers are doing the same thing right now, that some of the stay home, don't come to work till the end of the year is because employers are reconfiguring the workspaces to make them safer. If they, for example, had a staff canteen, they need to change that to be socially distanced and no buffet food anymore, right? Buffet is off the menu. So we've been making changes in our working environment within the constraints we have as a small business. But in some ways, we have the benefit of being a small business. It's a much more trusted environment. It's easier to trust at small scale.
Cool. Thanks, David. And I think we are actually getting towards an end. That was the last question. We've gone all through them with a little bit like 10 times over time. I hope that's fine for people, but otherwise you wouldn't have stayed.
Well, thank everyone. I also need to go because I have company meetings starting in 20 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot to everybody. And yeah, it was awesome to have you over here in New Zealand and Australia. And I hope you might join our meetups and maybe pop in for another one in the next few weeks. We have quite some good stuff coming up.
Well, that's very good. I was going to say that I hope there will be a time when I can get back to your part of the world. It's been 5 years or so already, and it's overdue that I get back down there, but who knows when at the moment.
We'll keep you updated what's happening on our borders. And above all, thank you so much, David, for doing this for us today.
Well, thank you everyone for coming, and thanks for the questions. I'm impressed there were so many questions about the actual content in the presentation.
Yes, I was thinking the same. Yeah, Daniel, do you want to say anything?
No, I just wanted to say thanks everyone for coming along, and keep an eye on the meetups. Any other discussion, you can add them to the meetups. There's lean coffees that go on around Melbourne and Sydney and other areas, so bring them to that. You'll probably see me in some of those, and keep the conversation going. I know a few of you are on some Slack channels and things like that. Reach out to us if you've got any other questions, and let us help you out. Understand Kanban.
I think we will share the video and the slides, I suppose. And if you have any questions, just come across to one of us. If you have ideas, we are welcoming to take on board any ideas how to develop the meetups and to make it valuable. And I hope to see you all in one of our trainings soon, of course.